African spirituality is not a religion. It is not a myth. It is not a superstition. It is a system of life, a philosophy of being, a framework of the cosmos that has guided millions across generations. It was here before borders, before colonial maps, before the arrival of ships and foreign tongues. African spirituality is the original lens through which the continent's people saw their world, their ancestors, and their purpose. Yet today, it stands at a crossroads, misunderstood, vilified, romanticized, and sometimes forgotten. To understand African spirituality, we must go back to its roots, not just in time, but in consciousness. It is based on a fundamental belief that everything is interconnected. The living, the dead, nature, the stars, the unborn. This belief gave birth to rituals, to music, to ceremonies, to sacred dances beneath the moonlight. From the Yoruba to the Akan, the Zulu to the Dinka, across the vast diversity of Africa's ethnic groups, the spiritual thread remains the same: balance, respect, harmony, ancestry. Unlike Western religions that often separate the divine from the human, African spirituality teaches that the divine exists within and around us. The supreme being, often too great to be fully known, is approached through intermediaries, spirits, ancestors, forces of nature. These are not idols. They are reflections of life's complexity. They are the forces of wind, water, war, fertility, and healing. They live in trees, they dance in rivers, they whisper in dreams. But with the arrival of foreign religions, Christianity and Islam, African spirituality was pushed underground, branded as witchcraft, demonized by missionaries, outlawed by colonial laws, and even feared by its own descendants. The colonizer knew that to destroy a people, you must sever them from their soul. The forced conversion of millions of Africans was not just about religion, it was about control. If you change a person's God, you change their identity. You change how they see the land, you change how they raise their children. You change what they believe is sacred. Yet despite centuries of suppression, African spirituality survived. It lived in the rhythm of the drum, the naming of children, the pouring of libation, the silent prayers whispered in native tongues. It adapted, it traveled. It crossed oceans during the transatlantic slave trade, blending with Catholicism in Brazil, Haiti, and Cuba to form syncretic religions like Candomblé, Vodou, and Santeria. Today there is a reawakening. Across Africa and the diaspora, people are asking, who am I? Where do I come from? What did my ancestors believe before colonization? They are searching for meaning beyond the walls of organized religion. They are lighting candles not in rebellion but in remembrance. They are not abandoning faith, they are reclaiming it. But this return is not without challenges. Centuries of demonization have created fear and misinformation. African spirituality is often misunderstood as a cult, dangerous, or backward. Even within African communities, those who practice it are ridiculed or ostracized. Some leaders label it primitive while promoting imported religions that came with colonial chains. Let us be clear, African spirituality is not perfect. No system is. Some practices have been distorted. In the wrong hands, spiritual tools can become tools of manipulation or fear. Charlatans exploit vulnerable people. Harmful rituals are sometimes carried out in the name of tradition. These are not the essence of African spirituality, they are its shadows. And like all systems, it must evolve, critique itself, and align with ethics and human dignity. But to dismiss it entirely is to erase centuries of wisdom. It is to forget the indigenous knowledge of healing, of farming, of astronomy, of law and governance, that were all woven into spiritual life. It is to lose a compass that once guided kings and queens, warriors and healers, poets and prophets. The question is not whether African spirituality should return. It has already returned. The question is, what role will it play in the future of Africa? To answer that question, we must confront the complexity of African spirituality's impact on individuals, on communities, and on the very foundation of African society. The advantages of African spirituality lie in its holistic nature. It does not separate mind from body or soul from society. It offers a framework in which healing is not just physical but emotional and ancestral. It teaches that when a person is sick, the community is also out of balance. In this way, it promotes collective responsibility and interconnectedness. Take, for instance, the practice of ancestral veneration. This is not idol worship, as some critics suggest. It is a sacred remembrance, a dialogue across time. Ancestors are not dead, they are part of the living fabric. They are consulted for wisdom, guidance, and protection. This sense of continuity gives people a strong identity, a rootedness that is often missing in modern urban life. Furthermore, African spirituality emphasizes balance between the masculine and feminine, the individual and the collective, the material and the spiritual. In many traditions, the feminine is revered as life-giver and cosmic force. Priestesses and matriarchs held spiritual and political power in ways that modern patriarchal systems have erased. This reverence for balance can serve as a guidepost for gender equality movements on the continent. Also, African spirituality is deeply democratic at its core. It encourages participation. Rituals are communal. Decisions are often made through consensus. Elders do not impose, they guide. Diviners do not command, they interpret. This is a radically different form of leadership than the hierarchical, often authoritarian models left behind by colonial rule. But African spirituality is not without its disadvantages, especially when viewed through the lens of development and politics. One of the key challenges is the lack of documentation. Oral traditions, while rich and dynamic, are vulnerable to distortion and loss. Many practices were never written down, and as elders pass away, much is forgotten. This makes it difficult to institutionalize or scale spiritual systems in the modern world. Another disadvantage is the exploitation of spiritual belief. In the absence of regulation, some individuals misuse spirituality for personal gain. From fake healers demanding exorbitant fees to political leaders claiming divine mandate, spirituality can become a tool of deception. Worse still, harmful practices such as child sacrifice, witch hunting, and gender-based taboos have persisted in some regions. These acts, often rooted in fear rather than faith, tarnish the image of African spirituality and must be openly condemned. There's also the tension between tradition and innovation. In a rapidly changing world, many young Africans feel disconnected from ancestral practices. They struggle to find relevance in rituals that don't speak to urban life, digital economies, or global culture. If spirituality does not adapt, it risks becoming a relic instead of a resource. As we go deeper into the heart of African spirituality, we encounter a truth that is often overlooked. Spirituality is the glue of African life. In pre-colonial times, every event, birth, death, harvest, war, rain, illness, was interpreted through a spiritual lens. It was not seen as separate from life, but rather the essence of life itself. In this framework, every human being was born with a purpose, known in Yoruba as Ori, or divine destiny. To live well was not just to accumulate wealth or power, but to live in alignment with your spiritual path. This alignment was maintained through rituals, taboos, songs, stories, and symbols. It was protected by elders, priests, diviners, herbalists, and clan heads. When someone strayed from their path, they were not punished first but corrected. Healing was prioritized over judgment. This ethic created a deeply relational society, not only between people, but between the living and the invisible world. Trees, rivers, mountains, and animals were seen as living spirits. This worldview fostered a profound ecological consciousness long before the world spoke of environmental protection. One of the richest examples of this ecological wisdom is found among the Dogon people of Mali. The Dogon have an astronomical system that predates modern telescopes. They knew about the Sirius star system, its invisible companion star, its elliptical orbit, and its 50-year cycle, long before it was confirmed by Western scientists. This knowledge was not written in books but passed down through initiation and oral tradition. How did they know? Through rituals, dreams, meditation, and communication with the spiritual realm. The Dogon are not an exception. Across Africa, spiritual practices often preserved scientific insights, from herbal medicine to climate cycles, architecture, and mathematics. African spirituality is therefore not anti-science. It is a different science, holistic, relational, and intuitive. Its symbols and myths are not mere superstition. They are encoded knowledge like poetry or metaphor, pointing to truths that logic alone cannot reach. The challenge is to decode, not dismiss, these systems. This is where modern education must evolve. Imagine African universities that teach both engineering and ancestral cosmology, both neuroscience and dream interpretation, both chemistry and plant spirit medicine. This is not regression, this is integration. As Africa modernizes, the need to integrate spiritual wisdom with development goals becomes urgent. Take mental health, for instance. Many African countries lack trained psychologists, but they have thousands of traditional healers who understand trauma, grief, anxiety, and depression in their own terms. What if we trained healers and psychologists together? What if hospitals had spiritual counselors alongside medical doctors? What if development included cultural therapy? This is not theory. In Uganda, the NGO Traditional and Modern Health Practitioners Together Against AIDS, THETA, has been working for decades to bridge spiritual and biomedical healing. In South Africa, traditional healers are officially recognized by the government. In Senegal, herbalists and marabouts work hand in hand with community health programs. These models work because they respect local knowledge and community trust. They do not force people to choose between modernity and identity. They create a third space where both can thrive. But integration must also happen at the political level. Many African leaders invoke ancestral blessings during campaigns but ignore spiritual ethics once in office. True spiritual leadership is not about rituals, it is about values: truth, justice, humility, service. These are the core teachings of all African traditions. When leaders violate these values, they break the spiritual contract with the people. When they uphold them, they become more than politicians. They become elders, guides, and nation builders. We must ask, what would governance look like if it were rooted in ancestral ethics? Imagine parliaments that began sessions with libations to the land and prayers for wisdom. Imagine policies that are reviewed not only by lawyers but by cultural custodians. Imagine a continent where progress is not measured only by GDP, but by harmony, dignity, and spiritual health. This is not fantasy, this is possible. It begins by rethinking what we call progress. Spirituality can also inspire economic models. In many traditions, wealth was not hoarded but circulated. Generosity was a virtue. Elders say, what you give, you keep. What you hoard, you lose. This ethic is echoed in Ubuntu philosophy. I am because we are. This worldview challenges hyper-individualism and offers a more communal vision of prosperity. Imagine businesses that tithe to the community, banks that invest in ancestral lands, entrepreneurs who measure success by impact, not just income. Africa does not need to copy the West. It can lead the world with ethical capitalism, rooted in spiritual values. As we journey into the diaspora, we find that African spirituality has not died, it has transformed. In the Americas, enslaved Africans carried their beliefs in their blood and bones. Despite brutal suppression, they preserved their faith through songs, drumming, secret gatherings, and coded language. In Brazil, Candomblé maintains the Orisha tradition. In Haiti, Vodou became not just religion but revolution, fueling the only successful slave uprising in history. In Cuba, Santeria blends Yoruba deities with Catholic saints, creating a vibrant spiritual culture that empowers millions. In the United States and Europe, African spirituality is now undergoing a renaissance. Black people are reclaiming ancestral practices to heal from trauma, rediscover identity, and resist racial oppression. African spirituality has become a tool of liberation, not only from colonialism, but from internalized shame. Young people are turning away from dogma and seeking direct experience. They burn sage, study astrology, practice ancestral rituals, and reimagine what it means to be African in the 21st century. This movement is not perfect, but it is powerful. It is reconnecting the scattered pieces of a spiritual puzzle that was broken by slavery and colonization. Back on the continent, we see the same hunger for spiritual depth. In music, film, fashion, and literature, African artists are weaving ancestral themes into modern expression. From Afrofuturism to neo-traditional festivals, from drumming schools to plant medicine retreats, a new generation is reviving, remixing, and rerouting African spirituality for the present moment. But revival must be accompanied by responsibility. Not all traditions are harmless. Some practices, such as ritual sacrifice, patriarchal taboos, or exclusion of certain groups, must be re-examined in the light of modern ethics. Spirituality must evolve just as society evolves. The ancestors do not fear change, they demand integrity. And integrity means asking hard questions, challenging abuse, and keeping the spirit of truth alive. Let us also speak about spiritual trauma, a silent epidemic. For centuries, Africans were told that their beliefs were evil. Many were forced to convert, punished for practicing rituals, and shamed for honoring ancestors. This created a deep rupture in the collective psyche. Many now feel spiritually lost, trapped between rejection and revival. Healing this trauma requires more than pride. It requires ritual, dialogue, and reconciliation. It requires creating sacred spaces, physical and virtual, where people can ask, seek, mourn, remember, and rebuild. Imagine centers of African spirituality in every major city, places of study, ceremony, mentorship, and celebration. Imagine public holidays that honor ancestral wisdom. Imagine school curricula that teach not only colonial history but cosmology, clan structure, oral poetry, and indigenous psychology. Imagine African identity as something not just political but sacred. As we move forward, let us remember, African spirituality is not a museum artifact. It is not frozen in the past. It is a river. It flows, it changes shape, it finds new paths, but it never loses its source. And that source is love. Not the soft, romantic kind, but the fierce, ancestral love that says, you belong. You matter. You carry the wisdom of 1,000 generations. So whether you are in the city or the village, in the diaspora or on the continent, in a church, mosque or shrine, know this, your soul remembers. And when you are ready, the ancestors will welcome you, not to bind you to the past, but to guide you into your future. This is African spirituality. This is your inheritance. This is our collective power.